Michael Schratt speaking.
Well, Dr. Sala, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands. We are live, and I thank you for being here with us tonight.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I thought maybe we could start things out with some background. I'd love to hear about your background and what led you into the great work that you've been doing.
I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, I became very interested in this phenomenon back in 2001. In May, I saw the disclosure conference that was put on by Dr. Stephen Greer at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. And when I heard those 21 witnesses, it was truly life-changing. I was an academic at the time. I was teaching international politics at American University. I was a professor there on the faculty, and I realized that the information that Dr. Greer was able to provide through these whistleblowers really changed everything I knew or thought I knew about international politics and international conflict. And the more I studied the testimonies of those witnesses, the more it held up to scrutiny, and so I became convinced after doing that for about 18 months of studying these various testimonies that this was all very real. And so in early 2003 I decided that I would make this field of exopolitics my new academic interest.
I see, and boy, is it something, isn't it? I mean, it's just it's like the never-ending frontier. So, well, I wanted to ask you quickly before we go on with the subject at hand, because I've had this question's kind of been thrown at me left and right from people lately. What do you say to those who claim that we could never get through the Van Allen radiation belt? We couldn't leave the planet. People couldn't come here because we wouldn't have the technology to protect ourselves. And I don't know if you want to answer that, you can, and you don't have to. But I'm just curious because I think we've got the technology to do it.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Van Allen belts basically is an area of radioactive particles around the Earth, which, if any one was to stay in that area for any length of time, yes, you could certainly suffer quite serious radiation poisoning. But the thing is, spacecraft actually fly through that. Anything that is traveling to the moon, any of those Apollo missions and the astronauts on them, I mean, they would have flown through the Van Allen belts. They wouldn't have been in them long enough for the radiation to cause any kind of serious health effects. And the space programs basically are prepared for that. I mean, they have satellites in orbits ranging from a few hundred miles to thousands of miles, and you know, they pass through the Van Allen belts, and they're able to provide the necessary protective layers. Aluminium is sufficient to protect these satellites from the radiation, and so the same thing did happen with the Apollo missions.
And that's a great answer, and and that's what I thought. I mean, to say that we couldn't solve a problem like that, and that everything's been a lie. I mean, that's really giving no credit whatsoever to our species. I mean, I think we're smart enough to figure these things out. I mean, somebody did a long time ago. I think there's enough evidence of that. So, who's to say we couldn't? So, anyways, I just wanted to start with that. I thought that'd be a good place to start. Now, tell me about your research into the secret space program, and what do you know about it, and tell us a little bit about some of the whistleblowers. One in particular, Jeremy Corbin, I think his name is. Somebody had asked me to ask you about him.
Sure. Well, the secret space program is something that basically I became interested in back in 2003 when I really began researching the exopolitics field. And my first interest was in the missing funds from the Pentagon, the auditing irregularities that became famous on September 10 of 2001 when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld got up and gave a press conference and said that, we've got $1.7 trillion missing, or that we can't account for in the Pentagon, and people kind of like said, what? And then the next day you had the 9/11 attacks, and of course that dominated the news cycle from then on. But it became very clear to me that missing money at the Pentagon was basically the clue into a vast project that was being funded through this money that was being funneled through the Pentagon, that the Pentagon couldn't account for through regular auditing methods. And so that became my first clue that there was a huge secret space program that was being funded behind the scenes. And over the years since then, I've run into people, whistleblowers, who have been able to give me a lot of insights or some understanding of the secret space programs, typically people who have worked as super soldiers, who claim they've been taken off planet. A good example is Randy Kramer, who says that he worked as a super soldier for 17 years on Mars itself, that he came forward in early 2014 to say that. And more recently with Corey Good, who also says that he worked for 20 years in the secret space programs.
I see. And of these whistleblowers, I guess, what is some of the best evidence? And I don't expect them to pull a spaceship out of their garage or anything, but I mean, what is some of the best evidence that they have presented about the secret space program and those things that are contributed with it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Now, everyone asks, what's the evidence? And the thing is, these people are eyewitnesses, and I guess it's always worth mentioning that eyewitness testimony is direct evidence that in a court of law or in any congressional hearing can get a person convicted or someone indicted. So first person or eyewitness testimony is evidence. And so far, in the book that just has come out, I refer to eyewitness testimonies of 3 people that all said that they spent time on Mars. That is Michael Ralph, Randy Kramer, and Corey Good. So these 3 people all said that they worked for secret space programs, and that during their service they spent periods on Mars ranging from just short-term visits to as much as 20 years. And so that is 3 people who have direct evidence or have given eyewitness testimony that we have a secret space program with bases on Mars. And 3 witnesses is pretty compelling in any court of law. I mean, if someone sees a murder and the body is missing, it can't be found, but a person is missing, but 3 witnesses come forward. Eyewitnesses say that, we saw so and so kind of shoot this person and then take the body away and dump it or whatever. That's enough to get a conviction. And so similarly here, you have 3 witnesses who say that they have been on Mars with these secret space programs that are all being illicitly funded by this money that regularly goes missing through the Pentagon.
That's incredible. Now, did in your speaking with any of them, did they mention anything about? I mean, were they supposed to not remember this? I mean, how? Because I guess I wonder how they were let go remembering such things. So I would think that they weren't supposed to remember this, or they weren't supposed to talk about it at the very least.
Exactly. Yes. Each one of them describes a mind control that was used to wipe their memories, and so they basically referred to a process whereby at the end of their 20-year tour of duties, they were sent back to Earth with their minds being wiped of all the memories. And so in two of those cases, that is Randy Kramer and Michael Ralph, each of them basically were able to regain their memories over time through flashbacks, through some kind of retrieval process that was kind of like just the body basically restoring the memories, kind of like post-traumatic stress syndrome, where people who have suffered traumatic events, they have flashbacks and then they go seeking counseling and find out, well, why am I having these terrible kind of nightmares? And as they get to counseling, well, they find out that certain events happen to them that accounts for that PTSD. So that's what happened with those two whistleblowers. In the case of Corey Good, he says that basically the mind control never worked on him. He always remembered. And that was something that he retains to the present day, that he remembers everything that happened to him, that he never lost his memories. And, there are reasons for why this mind control, mind-wiping technology works on some people better than others. But essentially, if three people can remember these events, that means there must be thousands of others who don't remember.
Yeah, I would assume so. Now that these three do remember, and they are publicly talking about it, has there been any, I guess any kind of threats or attempts to stop them?
Well, that's interesting. I believe that the reason that they have not been stopped dead in their tracks, and this is something that each of them discussed to varying degrees, is that they've been allowed or indirectly encouraged to come forward. And that basically comes from a kind of policy dispute between those people running these secret space programs. There are those that want this information to be leaked or to be released to the general public, and those that want to maintain secrecy. And what has happened, and this also explains the Disclosure Project press conference as well, and why Dr. Stephen Greer was able to get as many as 400 whistleblowers to come forward to reveal their experiences in these various secret space programs and the UFO cover-up, was that sometime in the mid-1990s, the U.S. military basically decided that it would no longer abide by the secrecy system that appeared to be run by quasi-governmental corporate organizations that had now become transnational entities. And so the U.S. military, especially the Navy, has been behind these disclosures, has been basically allowing its military members to come forward and to release their information. So in the case of all three of these whistleblowers, including Corey Good, there was significant military support for them coming forward. And in the case of Corey Good, he's actually now working with elements of the secret space program, which is run by the U.S. military, which is called Solar Warden. The political leadership or the military leadership of Solar Warden are actually encouraging Corey Good to come forward with his testimonies, and similarly for Randy Kramer.
So they are currently working with a secret space program.
Well, that's correct, yes. Both of them are working with military officials or leaders in the secret space programs who want this information to come out. So in the case of Randy Kramer, he says that he is being advised by two members of the U.S. military, the U.S. Marine Corps, to basically come forward and reveal what he has experienced. And Randy Kramer has been doing similarly since he came forward earlier this year.
I see. Okay, so did they talk about how they get to Mars? What's going? Because I know of another gentleman, and I'm sure you probably know of him, Andrew Bishago, and he talks about teleportation. And I'm wondering if it has anything to do with that.
Well, yes. Basically, all the whistleblowers that I mentioned all say that teleportation or jump room technologies do exist. In the case of Michael Ralph, he says that that's how he was taken to Mars, through jump room technology. In the case of Randy Kramer and Corey Good, both of them say that they were taken to Mars by secret spacecraft, very large craft that have been built secretly through various multinational aerospace corporations like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and the Boeing Corporation, that these corporations have been able to develop these highly advanced anti-gravity technologies and spacecraft that can travel the distance between Mars and the Earth in less than an hour.
Wow, that's fast. That's real fast. So, well, where did this technology originate from? Is it reversed engineering technology? Is it technology left over from ancient civilization, or are we just that good that we could create this stuff?
A little bit of everything that you've just mentioned. The first anti-gravity spacecrafts were built in the 1920s and 30s in Germany. There was an organization called the Vril Society, and this was an occult metaphysical community that also had included in its membership some very talented scientists who were very interested in understanding the harmony or the coherence between advanced scientific principles and also metaphysics. And in particular, one of those individuals, Professor Winifred Schumann, who is best known today as the person who discovered the Schumann resonance, he, in the 1920s, began building the first prototypes of a flying saucer spacecraft. He was based in Munich at the Technical University of Munich, and he was working with Maria Orsich from the Vril Society in developing the first anti-gravity spacecraft. And because he was the professor of the electrophysics laboratory and understood well the principles of electrogravitics and also torsion fields using high rotating mercury that could generate anti-gravity effects, that he was able to build eventually spacecraft that used these kinds of technologies that could travel in and out of space. And by the time the Nazis came into power, the Nazis then incorporated a lot of this technology, but the secret societies, the German secret societies, continued their program of developing these technologies to develop what we now know to be a secret space program that continues to operate today.
Wow, that's amazing. So then when we're getting data that they're sharing, the data they actually attempt to share with us, that is NASA, JPL, and all that. So these rovers that are up there, are those just for toying around with the public then?
It is pretty much a public relations exercise. I think the people that put together NASA, President Eisenhower and then later President Kennedy, I think that they thought NASA would be a good idea to try to allow for some of these advanced technologies to be kind of gently released to the general public, while the military basically kept the lion's share of these technologies. So the idea, I believe, at the beginning was that NASA would be far more ambitious in terms of setting goals of like interplanetary space travel. But what we saw instead was that NASA basically just focused exclusively on kind of outdated rocket-propelled liquid technologies, propulsion technologies.
And it was a good place to hide the Nazis too, right?
Well, they were also part of that secret space program that the Nazis that helped with the Apollo program were also helping develop the very first space program that the military wanted, because they were very concerned because Nazi Germany, as I mentioned, through the secret societies, had succeeded in developing a space program, and that they were still active, that they hadn't been destroyed at the end of the war. In fact, the lion's share of the advanced flying saucer space program that the Nazis had developed emerged from the war untouched, because it was all being constructed down in Antarctica and the South America during the whole of the Second World War. So these were technologies that had all of that time to be developed and deployed.
And so, I mean, with this technology, so then a lot of people say that they had some kind of alignment with some kind of extraterrestrial race, and that's how they got this technology. And whether they did or didn't get it from ET, it would obviously have to be very advanced technology. And I wonder, with that type of advanced technology, why aren't we all speaking German today?
Oh, good question. Well, they definitely were helped. The Nazis were helped by various groups, both off-planet and intraplanet. That is, there were some extraterrestrials that helped the Nazis, and there were also intraterrestrials, or beings that live in subterranean regions of the Earth, breakaway human civilizations that date back many thousands of years, that have advanced subterranean bases. So both of these groups helped the secret societies, in particular, the Thule and the Vril societies, because they were very interested in establishing some kind of understanding of esoteric principles with advanced technologies. And what happened after the war, and why was the United States conquered by the Nazis? Why didn't the Nazis win the war if they had all this advanced technology? Well, the important thing to keep in mind was that the Nazis had two kind of programs running in parallel. One was run by the Nazi SS, which was the weapons program, and that had not succeeded in being able to weaponize flying saucers. And the other secret space program was run by the Nazi secret societies, or the German secret societies, the Vril Society and so forth, and that was allowed to develop peacefully in the Americas and in Antarctica during the war. And after the war, they were able to continue, and they had advanced technologies. And then when the Nazi SS fled Europe and went down to the Americas, they joined with the other flying saucer program run by the secret society, and together they infiltrated the U.S. secret space program.
I see. So what would be the overall purpose? I mean, I could think of several of them, but I mean, I want to hear, what you got. What is the goals of a secret space program? Is it to secretly advance the human race, or is it to secretly keep control over the human race?
It's really a combination of those factors, those desires.
Or is
there are those that want power, that want to be able to have unlimited technologies that they can use and run so that they could amass more and more power. Then there are those that want to advance their knowledge, want to understand ancient history, want to understand the higher principles of esoteric law and so forth. And in Germany, you had a combination of both, which led to the success of the secret space program that they had there. And that was carried over to the US. and other countries that currently are part of international secret space program, and these people that are involved in these kind of range the spectrum in terms of why they're involved. You can have scientists involved who really just want to better the human condition, want to work with the most advanced technologies because they believe that this can somehow help the human condition. To industrialists who see that this is a way for amassing great wealth. If you have spacecraft that can travel to distant asteroids or moons and mine these planetary bodies for precious metals, then you have a means of amassing great wealth. And so you have industrialists involved for that reason. And then you have the military who are really wanting to have more and more advanced destructive weapons that they could use if ever necessary to be able to conquer and take over any territory or defend the earth.
Doctor, I used to believe a long time ago, well, the reason they keep these things secret is because they don't want other countries to know, what they've got. I used to be naive and think that way. And the truth is that they keep these things secret because they don't want the people, you and me, they don't want us to know about it. They want to keep us grounded because I've always felt like the war is on we the people, and that, Russia, China, all these countries in the United States, it's almost like they're playing the game together, and like we're the only ones who are left out of, the know.
Yes, yeah, and that's exactly the key here is, who is in the know, who is in the loop. The people in the loop, they get access to these technologies and the information, and of course, that gives them all a great number of benefits. Those outside of the loop, that doesn't only include you and I and the general public. It also includes people in the conventional military, like the 4-star generals and the 4-star admirals that are in charge of aircraft carriers and are in charge of kind of aircraft fleets. These generals and admirals, many of them, the majority of them, have no clue about these secret space programs, because if they did, their morale would suffer greatly. Why would a 4-star admiral occupy himself with some ship that can float on the ocean at like 100 knots top speed when he knows that there are flying aircraft carriers that can travel throughout our solar system at greater speeds than light? I mean, that person, that military senior military official, they would be devastated if they learned that this kind of advanced weapons technology existed. So, they're also kept out of the loop because, this secret is basically kept to relatively very few people.
Faster than the speed of light. So that's wow. And I'm still kind of stuck on the whole 1 hour to Mars thing. I mean, that's amazing. That means that right now they could be making trips back and forth like, oops, I forgot my wallet. Let me go back. No big deal.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, both Randy Kramer and Corey Good described the journey to Mars as being as short as 30 minutes. And so that's flying at superluminal speeds. It's kind of like, it's more like a kind of like they've mastered the technology for where a spacecraft can basically bend space-time to travel from point A to point B very, very quickly.
And how much of an ET involvement would you say there is or would the whistleblower say there is in the secret space program?
There is a great deal of extraterrestrial involvement in all of these programs. For one reason is that the extraterrestrials have been biologically engineering humanity for many thousands of years. That our genetics are a mixture of as many as 22 different extraterrestrial civilizations. So we're a hybrid race. And the extraterrestrials that have been involved in this hybridization program for hundreds of thousands of years have a vested interest in humanity in terms of how well they're able to survive, how well they're able to integrate advanced technologies, how well they're able to deal with outer space travel, and so many different things that we have that makes them very interested in us.
I see. Well, Doctor, we've got to take a break here, so we're going to go ahead and do that, if that's okay with you. Folks, you could call us at 803-392-4566. That is 4LNM. Or you can private message me. I wanted to ask you, well, before I even get into that, how about tell us a little bit about the latest book of yours, how you think it will help others get a grasp on all this, and where people can get it. We'll start there.
Sure. Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. It's just come out. And that book basically discusses 5 different secret space programs that different whistleblowers have talked about. And we've already kind of mentioned the first of those, which was the Nazi secret space program. And I also briefly mentioned the second of those, which was the Solar Warden secret space program, which many people are familiar with through people like Gary McKinnon, who says that they saw that when McKinnon hacked into the NASA and to the Pentagon computers, he saw lists of names of non-terrestrial officers and fleet-to-fleet transfers. That was referring to the Solar Warden program. There is also a corporate-run program, which is called the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. And this is a program that basically has all of the leading aerospace industries, not only in the United States, but also from the United Kingdom, from Australia, Canada, and so forth. All of the leading aerospace industries secretly cooperate in the construction of these advanced spacecraft that are able to travel at greater than the speed of light. And these craft are then sold to the secret space program, the U.S. military aspect of it, which is the Solar Warden program. But then these corporations also keep the most advanced technologies for themselves for what has become the most powerful of the secret space programs that are based that have arisen recently, and that is the corporate-run program. There is also a fourth program, which is an international program. Basically, this program was put together by none other than President Ronald Reagan. I mean, that's going to be a shock to a lot of people. But in the book, I discuss the formation of the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate. Is that from Ronald Reagan's initiatives to basically get all the nations on the planet to cooperate in basically preparing for defending the Earth from an alien threat. And Reagan was very serious about that. And we know from speeches he gave at the United Nations and at many other fora that he actually was truly fascinated by the prospect of humanity cooperating to deal with an alien threat. And so behind the scenes, Reagan actually succeeded, and the international space program that comprises most major nation states was put together. And that was directly a factor in the ending of the Cold War. So people often ask, well, why did the Cold War end? Where did all the money go? Where did the peace dividend go? Well, it all went into this secret space program that was run by this international group of nations. And finally, there's a fifth secret space program,
Wow.
which is basically small rogue special access programs. And I can talk more about that later if you like.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I wonder, did this have anything to do with the whole Star Wars initiative that Reagan wanted?
Oh, definitely, yes. Ronald Reagan, he was briefed on these advanced technologies, and he was briefed about the existence of extraterrestrial life and of the existence of a secret space program that was being run by the U.S. Navy that was called Solar Warden. So Reagan was briefed on all of that, and he knew that. And so he used it as a carrot to entice other nations like the Soviet Union, China, and other major nations that weren't involved in the Solar Warden program, because the Solar Warden program was basically a program that had personnel from the five echelon countries, and that is the United States, Canada, Britain, Australia, and New Zealand. That these five English-speaking nations were all part of the Solar Warden program in terms of providing personnel and resources and so forth. So countries that were outside of that, out of that kind of small group of of those echelon countries, Reagan tried to basically get them to cooperate in terms of passing on any knowledge, any information that they had concerning advanced technologies and extraterrestrial life. And the way to do that was to come up with a new space program that would have a different mandate to the Solar Warden program. And the mandate for this new program would be to basically be a kind of explorer-type program, similar to the Star Trek series, where this international space program would travel interstellar distances and basically meet different extraterrestrial civilizations and be involved in developing advanced technologies for a possible defense of Earth, if necessary, against a hostile alien species. That was one of the things that Reagan really believed was possible, and he was able to persuade other nations that this was something worth cooperating on because the alien threat was very real.
Yeah, and some of the listeners are asking they say, ask the guest to talk about Program 5 now. They want to hear about the fifth secret space program.
Oh, sure. Okay, so that fifth secret space program, basically it's a kind of catch-all description for all the different rogue special access programs that are involved in these secret space programs. Essentially, what that means is that, especially in the United States, you have special access programs that have access to advanced technologies, such as a jump gate, right? So you have a special access program that has access to jump gates. Andy Basiago described that particular program Pegasus. So that's a special access program. In the kind of the jargon, it would be kind of considered a waived, unacknowledged special access program. So essentially, the people that run that program and others like it really answer to no one. The managers and the people who are involved in setting policy for those different programs, that they answer to themselves and to this kind of nebulous group called Majestic 12, or whatever name it goes by today. And so essentially you have, with this fifth secret space program, kind of many different rogue operations, and today it appears that one of their chief areas of research is artificial intelligence, and that's a very dangerous element when it comes to space travel and advanced technology, because other space programs that I've mentioned already and also extraterrestrials themselves say that artificial intelligence has proven itself to be a threat, a great threat on other worlds, and that humanity faces great danger if it goes down this track of developing artificial intelligence. And so some of these some elements of this fifth program are very heavily involved in research and development of artificial technology.
Oh, that is disturbing, because I have talked to a couple guests most recently who were talking about, well, one called it the machine and the other one called it Iggy. And you could call it whatever you want, but what it is artificial intelligence, and its goal, really, I think, is to take over humanity.
Exactly. You had very recently the Jade Helm 15 exercise from I believe June 15 to September 15, and that was basically testing a quantum level computer that would basically take over top-level decision-making for military exercises. And what that means is that generals and admirals would not be running future military operations. It would be these quantum computers that would be part of this artificial intelligence network that would be basically predictive, that they would be able to predict real-time events in order to master the human domain. This is one of the key elements of the Jade Helm exercise, was to master the human domain, and this is the key for what artificial intelligence would be doing for the future. It would basically try to anticipate all possible human responses to any kind of attempt to take over and control human society. And so this artificial intelligence, quantum computing that was basically being tested, would be in the future something that could lead to humanity basically being taken over by this AI. And so the Jade Helm exercise was the first case, or the first real testing of this advanced computing technology, and I'm sure there'll be more.
Oh, so when a lot of people were thinking, oh, they're trying to sneak into the population and this and that. So it really wasn't about that so much. It was more about testing out the AI and making sure that it can do its job properly.
Well, that's right. Yes, they understand that the key for the future is mastering the human domain, and it's very important that we understand what that term means. Mastering the human domain means basically being able to anticipate all the possible responses that humans would have to any attempt to control or take them over, and so for an artificial intelligence quantum computer, what it needs is data. If it can get data, real-time data from people's thoughts and actions, then it can anticipate what people are going to be doing and how they might respond to any attempt to repress them. And unfortunately, U.S. Military veterans and many others have had implants surgically put into their brains. And what this does is that it allows this quantum computing AI to monitor their thoughts and their emotions from space satellites. And so as more and more people have these implants put into their heads, then you have the quantum computers being able to get access to much more information about what people are thinking and feeling on Earth. And once they reach a certain point, once they reach a certain critical threshold, they'll have enough information to be able to anticipate exactly how people will respond to any attempt to repress them. And once they reach that critical threshold, then they have the means to be able to take humanity over.
And that's one of the reasons they do what they do on Facebook. They put out these posts to try to throw you off. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. We do have a call. We've got 909 area code. You're on Late Night in the Midlands. First name, where you're calling from, and please have the show turned down in the background.
Michael, Big Bear Lake, California.
Well, welcome aboard, my friend.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I do feel that way. I felt that way as a kid, where you know that it's a game. Not a game, but I mean, you know it's a thing where you're thrown in there. And it's very interesting to hear your guest this evening saying that.
Oh yeah, it's it makes sense. That's for sure. Again, like I was saying before I took the call, is that Facebook did this, and they've been doing it right along, but they'll get things posted up there to get your reactions, because what they're doing is this artificial intelligence is figuring you out, how you're going to react to things, so it knows how to deal with you later.
Right, it is, and it's totally artificial intelligence. And I mean, yeah, it can go like way further into military things and stuff like that. But really, what it is it's mind mining.
Yeah.
Really is what it is.
Yeah, it certainly is. Did you have a question or a comment for the guest?
Yes, I did. Sorry. Yeah. No, I was just listening along. I wanted to call in.
Well, I appreciate it.
It's amazing. It's very strange, And I mean, the whole and I think that we were definitely interacted with by aliens, obviously. And I don't know how far that stretches, but yeah.
Yeah. Doctor, anything you'd like to comment?
Well, yes, I just want to emphasize exactly what the caller said and how you responded, that this artificial intelligence, it operates in being able to anticipate your reactions to external events and stimuli. And so anything that tries to anticipate your reaction and basically take that back to some database, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, whether it's military exercise like Jade Helm, all of that can be used eventually for having this artificial intelligence anticipate any possible response, so that then our society, or the kind of freedoms we take for granted, could be taken away, and we wouldn't know how to effectively challenge that.
Yeah, and for those who think, have you ever called, I mean, I'm sure mostly everyone has, have you ever called a utility company and you get the recording and she goes, ha 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 ha, I didn't understand your reply and all that stuff? Well, don't think you're just talking to some robotic woman, because they're recording all that. They're keeping track of all that. So when you're on the other end thinking no one else is hearing you and you're cursing that woman out, they know.
Yeah. No, it's true. It totally is true. I mean, it's artificial intelligence, and they are, and it's amazing how much we've given away to just like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, we're just calling them. Well, you're not really, because you're giving them all your information, first of all, and then secondly, they're not real, and yeah, it's strange, man. It's strange.
It is. It's strange. It's scary, and the scariest part about it is it's true. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Hey, Michael, keep up the good work, man.
All right. I
Thank
appreciate your call. I really do. Thank you so much. Yeah, doctor, it is. It's when I say it's scary, not scary in a way where go hide under your desk, because like I've heard people say, well, I'm moving to this country and I'm moving here and I'm moving there. Look, the bottom line is that it doesn't matter where you go. When push comes to shove, this thing can find you. It is the Terminator. It's got eyes everywhere. It can connect into satellites. It can connect in anywhere it wants to. So it could spot you out. Just like people say, hey, look at this fossil on Mars from this Google Images. They could get pick you out in the woods too, I'm sure. With the technology. So the best way to combat this is for us all to come together. And why, doctor, do I picture in the future everybody coming together and somebody trying to get a virus into this thing so that we can one day be free again? I don't know. That's just have I watched too many movies?
Well, I think the main thing here is to understand, as you've been saying, that this quantum computing AI system needs data. It's a big sponge. It's always taking up more and more data because it needs that to be able to anticipate human responses. And one of the main mechanisms that they're able to kind of collect their data now is through this kind of brain implant technology that is being used surreptitiously, especially with military personnel. Many veterans, for example, that may have suffered injuries, they have this technology put into them, being told that, well, we can kind of monitor or assist or whatever rationale they're given. But this technology, as more and more people are inserted with these implants, it can be remotely monitored by satellites and fed into these quantum computers to kind of like know exactly what's going on where. And also they have even more sophisticated implants now, whereby people's emotions can be influenced by the satellites that are transmitting whatever the quantum computers are telling them. So people who have these implants can suddenly start feeling angry and agitated or frustrated or whatever, and not that anything around them has actually made them feel that way, but because these implants are sending signals to their cerebral cortex that they're supposed to feel angry now, and so people's emotions can be influenced negatively or positively, however this quantum computer wants people to be influenced. So I think in the future, what we need to do is to make sure that fewer and fewer of these brain implant technologies are put into people without them being conscious of exactly what's going on.
Wow, and just think, it's like we're captive right now. When you think about it, we're in a whole lot of trouble, ladies and gentlemen, with this type of technology. Unless, of course, you don't believe it, then you're not in trouble until it comes to your doorstep. But for the populace here, and we are. This is really mind-boggling, because how do we get out of something like this when most of the people won't even consider that it's happening?
I think people are kind of slowly waking up to this.
That's the problem.
People are becoming more aware of it.
It's very slow. That's what scares me. So, but yeah, well, again, it's really disturbing for me to think. I had somebody who was telling me about nanobots being sprayed in the chemtrails in the sky, and I'm thinking, wow, if they're doing something like that, it's worse than I thought. So tell me a little bit about Admiral Byrd. I have a listener who sent in a question. He says, can you ask the guest to give us the story on Admiral Byrd?
Well, he is a very interesting individual. He was a very famous Antarctic and Arctic explorer. And he, in 1939, was given orders by President Roosevelt to go down to Antarctica with several Navy ships and to find and to basically determine whether any of the Nazi bases that had been set up in Antarctica were infringing on the Monroe Doctrine. So basically, back in 1939, that was June of 1939, this was when, actually it might have been earlier in 1939, that Byrd received those orders. Now, of course, Nazi Germany went to war later in 1939, and so Byrd never actually followed through on that because events were overtaken by the war. But then at the end of the Second World War, this time Byrd received orders from President Truman to go down to Antarctica and to find the Nazi bases that he originally was ordered to go to find in 1939, but then never did because of the war and the rising tensions. Well, so now he travels there in the end of 1946, beginning of 1947, to Antarctica to find the Nazi bases. But in the 7 years since he first got those orders, the Nazis had been able to fortify their bases and to develop advanced technologies, so that when Byrd arrived there with his task force, with Operation High Jump, basically they were outgunned. They were outmatched by the flying saucers that the Nazis had developed successfully down there. And we know that Byrd went public and gave several interviews talking about significant military casualties and encountering a new enemy that could fly from pole to pole in the blink of an eye. And also we know from the release of Soviet KGB files that there were a number of U.S. servicemen that actually witnessed the flying saucers engage with the aircraft and the battleships of the Operation High Jump, and how the U.S. suffered a very bad loss.
Incredible. Okay, another listener asks, can you ask the guest what the significance is of Antarctica? Are there really bases? Tell me, he says.
Right. Well, what I know from the testimony of these secret space programs, especially Corey Good, who's been very helpful in releasing a lot of detailed information about what is known from the Nazi era and what was going on down in Antarctica. The information that he was able to access from the secret space program, the Solar Warden program, was that the Nazis had succeeded in developing 3 main bases in Antarctica, and that these bases were built over the remains of earlier civilizations that had built bases down there. So it was like the Nazis were able to find their way into these remote locations in Antarctica. They discovered these ancient bases that had been built hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, and basically just built upon them or developed them even further, so that they brought in their own technologies, their own personnel. And so what you had in Antarctica then was not only a Nazi presence during and after the Second World War, but you actually had the existence of these ancient bases with a lot of very old, sophisticated technologies that were being found by the Nazis and being developed by them.
Incredible. Yeah, and I have some who have argued with me over the years that it's either one or the other. It's Nazi technology or it's alien technology. And I always ask, why can't it be both? Why can't it, be from the aliens to the Nazis? But I do always question that, with that type of technology, how the heck do you lose, or were you supposed to lose? I don't know, but the technology's real, whoever it came from, that's for sure. Now, the next question here is, does your guest have any thoughts on Planet X, the Anunnaki, Yeah, that's the question.
Well, I do know that this has been of great interest to various organizations, in particular the Vatican. I think the Vatican and various secret societies, we talk about the Illuminati, the Cabal, they have been very interested in the idea of the return of Planet X, of Nibiru, and that this might be the return of the gods. And so they have been very prominent in trying to get any intel that they can find on the return of a Planet X or of the gods. Now, the problem here is that some of the spacecraft that extraterrestrials have, and more recently that have come into our solar system, can themselves be incredibly large. Some of them are as large as the planet Jupiter. I mean, that's how big they are. These are just kind of, I think, 70,000 miles in diameter, which is just an enormous craft. And that these craft have come in, and so it means that it's very hard to tell if any of these craft that have come in, spacecraft, or very large devices that have come in here into our solar system to kind of like regulate the cosmic energies that are coming into this region of space, that these are in any way associated with Nibiru. So essentially, it's a very crowded real estate out there in outer space. Now, that's not to say that the Planet X Nibiru doesn't exist. It may well exist. Certainly the Cabal and the Vatican have been very interested in it and the return of the gods. But because there have been so many other different spacecraft and that have been coming in that are as large or even as large as Jupiter, that means that it's very hard to tell whether Planet X is just one of these large kind of craft, whether it's a planetoid or whether it's even going to manifest in this kind of dimension.
Yeah, and I've kind of speculated the last couple of years with people and saying, how do you know that it's actually a planet? How do you know it's not some giant starship and maybe it's got the letters on the side Nibiru? Like the SSS Minnow or something. This was called the Nibiru, or and maybe it could be. I mean, people. Some want it to be a planet. They want it to come and they want it to wipe everything out. And I guess they like that element of fear. Me myself, I always say it could be anything. It could be a planet. It could be a dwarf star. But if it's any of those, I doubt it's probably not going to come back in our lifetime. But it could very well be a giant ship as well. So I don't know. Planet X is one of those topics. It's kind of a taboo topic. It's I think there's a lot of evidence that shows that it's not crazy to talk about it or even consider it, because NASA has. We know that for sure. And whether it's a ploy that they've put out there to throw people off track or what have you, see, that's where we just don't know. But I'm always open to it, nevertheless. Doctor, water being announced on Mars. The questions ask, what does that tell you? Is this part of getting ready to tell us something? I mean, sightings have increased. Contacts seem to have increased, if you ask some people. But according to you and whistleblowers know, and some others, there's already been things going on Mars. So why would them telling us about water be so significant? Is it?
I don't think it's a tremendously significant development. I mean, NASA has been doing this for years now, kind of slowly building up the case that the conditions for life can be found on Mars, and therefore there might be a need in the future to kind of like send up NASA craft to actually look for life on Mars. But this is kind of like a slow motion process of kind of like preparing the public for the possibility that one day, that they will discover some form of life on Mars, microscopic particles or bacteria or something, and kind of like, but that really is, of course, kind of a really moot when it comes to the existence of these space programs where they actually have jump gates and spacecraft that can travel between the Earth and Mars in 30 minutes or so. The idea that somehow we need to look at a rover that is examining dirt and looking for kind of some bacteria or fossils, microscopic fossils, to show that maybe life existed one day some time ago on Mars. That that's all kind of ridiculous, really, given what these whistleblowers have been telling us. But NASA, unfortunately, is part of the problem. It is very much one of the key actors in this suppression of the truth concerning extraterrestrial life in our solar system and on Mars and on the Moon, and even in space itself. Space itself is not a vacuum that's inhospitable to life. There was the Russian scientists on the International Space Station found bacteria growing on the windows of the International Space Station when they cleaned it, and they took the bacteria back to Russia to examine it, and they found that indeed it was a form of sea plankton. So life can exist in the vacuum of space.
That's amazing. Well, you know what? I tried to, if I was going to pull anything positive out of this whole announcement by NASA, which I said before they said anything, I said they're going to tell you there's water there. I mean, because I already knew this, but I look at it as a confirmation of what we already know. And so, there's got to be a reason they're doing this. They must be setting up to slowly leak something out. That's what it seems to me. I could be wrong. The pickup in sightings. Now, I'll tell you, here's another thing. Some of these sightings, people can explain them away. One of the ones that I've had was incredible. I mean, I don't think it could be from Earth. I don't think it could even be from our military, because this thing was like pure energy. It held within it the light. The light did not reflect down or any of that. It literally contained its light. So, and it made no noise, and it was huge. And I'm thinking, what airport are they parking things like this at?
Yes, there have been many thousands of sightings, really, of these spectacular bright orbs in the sky. Some of the most impressive that I've seen are fleets of these things flying over in Mexico. Jaime Maussan was able to provide some of the videography of these fleets of flying orbs that were basically photographed over Mexican skies, and you see hundreds of these things up there, and they were clearly self-luminescent. They weren't reflecting light from the sun or reflecting light coming up from the Earth. I mean, these were objects that were self-illuminated, so they definitely weren't any of the kind of conventional explanations like balloons or geese or things like that. These were objects that were genuinely under intelligent control and artificial in nature.
I see. Do you believe we are seeded, or we are the seeders, or neither, or both?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, Michael. I think it is a little bit of both. One of the things that is very fascinating from the Corey Goode disclosures is that ancient human societies stretch back hundreds of thousands of years, if not millions of years, and that our ancient ancestors, the knowledge that they developed and the kind of genetic codes that they carried continue to the present day in these subterranean breakaway civilizations that are indigenous to the Earth. And so you have, on the one hand, you have this ancient human presence on the Earth with bloodlines that are very pure, that go back into antiquity. And then on the other hand, you have on the surface a kind of mixture, a potpourri, if you like, of different extraterrestrial genetics that have been kind of infused into the surface of humanity. So in a way, and of course, this is going to be a really important thing in the near future, is when these two diverging branches of humanity meet. The subterranean species that carry the genetics that go back into the ancient lineage to ancient times when there was a race called the Builder race, or the Guardians, that were the seeds of the most advanced technologies that even modern extraterrestrials don't understand some of these advanced technologies that were left behind by this Builder race. And so you have the ancient subterranean humans that have knowledge of this and have kind of bloodlines that stretch way back to that era. And then you have on the surface the rest of us who are really a kind of a hybrid of different ET groups with what was originally the kind of remnants of the surface humanity that survived cataclysms on the Earth.
I see. And why would you think, I mean, outside of the obvious, I guess, greed is certainly feeds a lot of evil on this planet, but why would humans, going back to the artificial intelligence, why would any human beings do or even mess with something that they know is potentially is designed to take over and be in control? Because I think back of the Terminator movie and movies, and I think of something like that, and it's not far fetched. I mean, that's kind of where we're headed, aren't we?
Well, exactly, yes, and it's very interesting. In the Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, the one that ran for 3 seasons, I think it was kind of in the mid-2000s. That reboot, it basically showed a synthetic human race, and what it showed was that they were in search of God, that these synthetics were seeking God, and that they were kind of like servants of God. Well, I mean, the God that the AI serve is, I guess we would call that Lucifer. That is a being that incredibly powerful, kind of a really incredible intelligence being, but that it thinks that it can basically do things better than what nature or what what many others would call a kind of an omnipotent kind of universal God that's kind of doing things behind the scenes. And so I think with the AI, what you have is an intelligence that is directly connected to this kind of Luciferian consciousness, which is why the Cabal, the Illuminati, are very supportive of artificial intelligence. At the 2015 Bilderberg conference, this was exactly what the Bilderberg group was trying to encourage all of the leading industrialists and the politicians that went to that meeting to kind of like try and accelerate as far as possible, which is the development of AI. Because for the Cabal, AI is a way for them to get closer to their God, which is kind of Lucifer. And so it truly is frightening that people think that way, that somehow AI or helping it establish itself is going to get you closer to God. But I think this is the way these people operate.
Yeah, I don't see it. See, there's good and bad in all technologies, I guess. I mean, except for I still see no good in the whole nuclear technology, but there is, it could be used for good or bad. I mean, we design a knife. You could either cut your meat at dinner with it, or you could cut your spouse. I mean, but what scares, see, this technology could be a good thing. Like I seen where they had come out now with a prosthetic arm that maybe a soldier could use that lost an arm, and this arm, it feels, it could touch, and they could literally feel with this fake mechanical arm. And I'm thinking, if you could do that, then I mean, I guess the last step really is downloading or uploading the consciousness, if you will, or something along those lines, and they'll have a biological robotic type being, and isn't that what they're kind of shooting for?
Oh yes, they have already developed that. I mean, they are able to clone beings now, so they can. This is one of the things that has been happening more recently, is that they've been less reliant on developing super soldiers. And they've been developing clones much more, because clones can be used in whatever way that's necessary to be able to fight wars, or to carry out orders, or to do whatever it is without any kind of accountability at all. So yeah, the clones are definitely one of the ways in which they're able to create synthetic beings that can basically replace the human species.
So then one day, say they want to, I don't know, shut somebody up. They could wait for, I don't know, you or I to come out and go to get in our car. They snatch us. They quick get out the 3D printer. They print out a new one of us. And now that new one of us will do what they say. They don't have to worry no more. Nobody will be suspicious because he's still there.
Well, that's exactly right, yes. They're able to develop these clones fairly quickly now, and if they wanted to do that with anyone, they definitely could, and they can even transfer the consciousness and destroy the body, the original body, and transfer the consciousness into the clone body, and the clone is kind of loaded up with all kinds of technologies, so that now you can control the body. You can control that person who carries the same consciousness, but now they're in a different body, and all of a sudden things are going on that they didn't know of before, and that can be done without them even knowing. So yeah, it's definitely very worrying, which is why truly it's important for every individual to kind of like establish a kind of spiritual connection to them, to their inner core, to something within them that can help them transcend these kinds of technologies, because anything that can be imagined can be built, and the people in the secret space programs are very clever people, and they're able to develop technologies that many people couldn't even imagine. One of the things that Corey Goode discovered when he recently went to Mars as part of a fact-finding mission to inspect claims of slave labor on Mars, was that he found that the interplanetary corporate conglomerate, that is the third of the secret space programs I mentioned earlier, that they are now trading with up to 900 different extraterrestrial civilizations. Now, you think about that, it's like, well, what would 900 different extraterrestrial civilizations want from us? I thought we were backward. But no, the thing is, humans, because we have really incredible emotions, our emotional range is much greater than other races, and we have this powerful imagination. So, anything we can imagine, we can build, because we have this incredible creativity. We have these strong emotions where we can become really focused on building something incredible, and so we're able to build things that are of great interest to extraterrestrials. And in fact, this is one of the things that Corey Goode says has emerged recently, is that extraterrestrials have kind of shifted their opinion of humanity from being one of this barbaric kind of race, a backwater of the galaxy, to one where we are really gifted engineers and builders.
Well, then I would have to say that the extraterrestrials have turned their TVs off, because if they've been tuning into this popular show Planet Earth, then they've seen a lot of horrible things going on. Me personally, I think that this planet is worse off, and I mean the planet itself and the people on it are worse off today. Not technology-wise. I think that if used well, it'd be very beneficial. But I don't have any faith in those calling the shots that that's going to happen. But I think that we're in probably the worst shape that dare I say that we've been in I don't know, long time. Anyways, I mean, wow, it seems like the whole planet is at war.
Well, that's by design. I mean, that has been deliberately created because the people running the secret space programs, I mean, they have all the advanced technologies being developed either off-planet or in underground bases. They don't share that technology with the surface of humanity. What they do with the surface of humanity is basically kind of bleed us dry in terms of resources and funds, where the surface population is kind of left to fend for itself with dwindling resources, and wars and disease and is being kind of deliberately engineered through various false flag operations. Like what we're witnessing today in the Middle East. I mean, the Islamic State. I mean, that's a false flag operation. And that is just one example of how conditions on the planet's surface are being deliberately kind of undermined and really created terrible outcomes for many segments of the population. Because the bottom line is that the people running these secret space programs would just love to wipe off surface humanity and then bring their kind of highly controlled, genetically engineered colonists and people that are part of the secret space programs to inhabit the surface of the Earth and start off a brand new civilization.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's like any parent. You look down at your children and you like to see what they've been up to, and or even if you don't want to go that route, if I created something or if I set something up, I guess I'd want to come back and check on it every now and then and see how it's doing. And for those who believe the ETs are coming to save us, and there are those who believe that, I don't know, I think that they stalled somewhere on the highway because we could use a lot of help. And that brings up this next question, and that is about Fukushima. With all the technology that we have, or even let's go to the extraterrestrials, and I'm sure their technology has got to be superb, right? At least I would think so. With all that technology, can we not do anything to clean up Fukushima? I mean, is this planet being transformed? Because it kind of feels like it is.
Oh, definitely. I mean, the technology is there to clean up Fukushima and basically restore the planet to pristine conditions. It's all there. But what's lacking is the political will to do it. And as I said, there are people, and talking about the cabal, the Illuminati, that want to engineer a global catastrophe. They want that. They want the Earth to experience a kind of end-time series of events. And so Fukushima is part of that. To kind of like poison. Start poisoning the Japanese and kind of pollute the oceans. This is part of their long-term strategy of making things so bad on the surface of the Earth that the consciousness of surface humanity basically creates these self-destructive sequence of events. So they're trying to encourage that. But definitely the technologies exist to clean the planet up. There are many positive extraterrestrial groups that are helping us, that are wanting us to kind of like get through this very dangerous time so that we don't kind of collectively manifest some doomsday scenario whereby we blow ourselves up, through some kind of nuclear holocaust or whatever kind of cataclysm can be kind of created behind the scenes. That we are being helped behind the scenes to be able to kind of rise above these very terrible conditions and collectively manifest a much brighter future.
Then it's fair to then assume that there are good and bad ETs, because there are some who feel like they're all bad, and I'm sure you've met those people who will even say that they're fallen angels or demons or they're and I think what happens is we fear the unknown. A lot of people do anyways. And so there are good and bad ETs. Now, I wonder, are they at war with each other about what's going on here? Because I hear some say that they're not allowed to interfere, but they really are interfering if they're like letting me see their ships. I mean, that certainly alters the things I'm talking about. That's for sure. So what's your thoughts on that? I mean, are they... Is there this cosmic rule, and are some of them breaking it, or what?
Well, yes, I think that the ETs are very similar to us. I mean, if we are a kind of repository of 22 different extraterrestrial genetics, bloodlines, then we are a mirror for the ETs. So yes, just as we have good and bad, they have good and bad. There are those that kind of intervene both for good reasons and bad reasons. There are ETs that just kind of monitor the situation and try and help out from behind the scenes. Or there are those that, behind the scenes try to kind of like make things worse, or who have a negative agenda. I think, you have truly a wide variety of motivations among the different ET groups. But I think the thing to really kind of keep in mind is that, in a sense, we are a mirror of them. And if you look at any society, any community, any town, there are always a far greater proportion of decent, caring, empathic people that look out for one another and will help a total stranger if necessary. And sure, you do have your criminal elements. You do have those that are will kind of like, without a second thought, take advantage of others. But they're always in a minority. They're always a small minority. And I think the same thing is with the extraterrestrial civilizations. By far, the greater majority of extraterrestrials, as far as I've been able to tell in my research, many of them, the majority of them, are really wanting to help humanity evolve and get out of a very dangerous situation where we, with some very bad choices, could really create hell on earth. And then you have other ETs that are truly wanting us to manifest hell on earth because they don't want us to succeed. They don't want us to be an example of how you could harmonize 22 different extraterrestrial genetics into a kind of planetary collective of peace and harmony. So, yeah, there are those that want peace and harmony on Earth and those that don't.
I see. And, this could be very well where the whole concept of heaven and hell came from, angels and demons. You have your good ETs, your bad ETs, and, you go back far enough, and I'm sure it wouldn't be hard to fool a primitive people. I mean, look, we're fooled today by a lot. Right?
Well, exactly. Yes. The idea of heaven and hell and different ETs or different gods reigning over heaven or different gods reigning over hell. I mean, that's part of various traditions. Various religions had similar themes. The pagans, you had Zeus, the god of the air, and then you had Hades, the god of the underworld. So this is found in many different cultures. But definitely we really have been a race that has been highly manipulated for millennia, and now the information is coming out in a way that has never happened before, because with the information age now you can get on the internet and you can read things that 50 years ago, you would have to go to some library in a remote part of the United States to be able to read that book or read that document. Now it's all available on the internet. So it means that we have this unprecedented opportunity to get the most esoteric knowledge that humanity has ever developed. And so we truly are at the cutting edge, or at the cusp of a really big breakthrough if humanity can kind of collectively think more positively and act together.
That's the key, acting together. We've got to get everybody on the same page, or at least a good majority of the people on the same page. I think it's not just physically, but consciously. And I think once we can do something like that, I'm not one of those new agers who's going to say, if we all concentrate on it, it'll just magically happen. And there's always going to be efforts that we have to take to change things. And so people will, the first step, I think, is coming together. But Doctor, hang on with us. We've got one more break we're going to take here. And he is linked up on our homepage on LateNightInTheMidlands.com. And you could find him linked up inside our picture slider or up on upcoming shows where our schedule's at. So either way, we'll get you there. What a very interesting show. And again, folks, it just... more pieces to the puzzle, more pieces to the puzzle. You've got to, some people, they rush to decision to determine, and because of that, they get stuck, and then they can't look any further outside the box. So I try not to do that. But boy, I'll tell you, there's just too much that points to us having a much wider history than that of this earth, I'm telling you. So we're going to get back to it with my guest here. I've got a couple more questions for him. And if you have any, you need to call in now, because he's only going to be with us for a few more minutes unless you have your questions that you need to ask. Doctor, I do have a few questions from listeners here that I still want to ask you. And, this one is about Clinton and Obama. Somebody said, I guess probably because it's on the little poster thing we put on the website, but they asked, how are they, or are they, any part of the agenda? And I almost want to laugh when I hear that, but I always say there are no stupid questions.
Well, Clinton and Obama. Well, let's start with Clinton. Clinton himself, at the very beginning of his administration, one of the things that he wanted to find out about, and very famous example is Webster Hubbell, a close family friend, was actually asked to go over to the Department of Justice and find the answer to two questions. One was who killed JFK, and two, what's going on with the UFOs. Now, Hubble couldn't find the answers to those two questions, and what we know from official documents released through the Freedom of Information Act was that Clinton was very interested in the UFO phenomenon, and that he was trying to find out what had gone on with Kennedy and what was happening with the UFO issue. So he was out of the loop. With Obama, I think that Obama also is someone that, if not directly interested himself, was basically surrounded himself with people who were interested in the UFO phenomenon. There are people like John Podesta, who was actually his transition, the chairman of his transition team back in 2008 and 2009 when he was setting up his first administration. Podesta was involved in the Clinton administration efforts to find out what was going on with UFOs, and more famously, Podesta at the beginning of this year, earlier this year, he said that one of his biggest failures during his time with the Obama administration was to once again fail to have the UFO issue disclosed to the public. So that was very significant, because that was saying that the UFO disclosure issue was something that was very important, not only for the Clinton administration, but also for the Obama administration. And so, yeah, they were out of the loop. And I think another president we could add to that is also Jimmy Carter was also another president who was kind of cut out of the loop there.
Sorry about that. My mic was cut for a second there, but yeah, I was just saying that some would say that Obama was groomed for the position. So
I don't know if he was groomed. I think presidential politics are a very tricky thing to predict. I guess we spent a little bit of time talking about artificial intelligence, mastering the human domain, and presidential politics, trying to work out which direction the public is going to go is always tricky. You can look at the current Republican administration, or the Republican presidential kind of contest. I mean, who would have thought that Donald Trump and this surgeon Carson would be leading the Republican pack?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we got another question here. Is the USA the only country with secret space program? And you touched on that earlier, but if you wouldn't mind hammering it one more time, that's the next question.
Well, definitely not. As I mentioned earlier, Nazi Germany developed their own space program, and that has continued to the present day. Then you had the Solar Warden program that was under the control of the U.S. Navy, and that continues to the present day. Then you have an international space program where all the major nations cooperate. We're talking Russia, China, every nation in Europe and the Americas, every major kind of country with an aerospace industry is part of the secret space program, which is run internationally. And then you have a corporate run space program which doesn't have any kind of national allegiance. It's kind of transnational in entity. But certainly, yes, the US is a major player in the secret space programs, but it's not the only country that has a hand in these space programs. And by the way, as I mentioned earlier, with the Solar Warden program that's run by the United States, that's really a kind of cooperation between the five echelon countries. That's the US, Britain, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand.
Okay. And a question comes in about nanobots, chemtrails, and the agenda behind it. And I know that I kind of briefly touched on that earlier, but maybe if you wouldn't mind getting a little in depth of what you might think the agenda would be, and not only the agenda, but do you have any of the whistleblowers talked about this kind of thing, these nanobots being, I don't know, sprayed and breathed in, and they're so tiny that you'd never see, you'd never know?
Oh, definitely, yeah. No, as far as Corey Good is concerned, yes, this is all part of the effort to try and promote artificial intelligence, because when we look at nanobots and when we look at things like smart dust, all of these tiny particles are sensors. That is, that they're designed to get information, and they transmit that information to a central processor like a quantum computer, which then basically is able to process all of that information to come up with its predictive modeling in terms of what's going to happen on the planet, how people are going to respond, and so forth. So when you have something like chemtrails, the spraying of these nanobots or this smart dust in the atmosphere. This is all designed to basically gather as much information as possible so that these very powerful quantum computers, which are constantly improving themselves because quantum computing is way ahead of traditional computing just because of the way it's set up. It can always improve itself, which is why it's an artificial intelligence, as opposed to normal computing, which is kind of much more linear. It needs a programmer to kind of increase its memory and so forth. But with quantum computing, it can do that itself. These quantum computers, the more information they get, the better they are at predictive modeling, and the more dangerous they become.
I hear that. All right. So a question comes in about 22 different alien groups, and that you touched on this earlier and asked if the guest would speak a little more in depth on these 22 different alien groups. And these would be, I guess, 22 that have been named to have some kind of involvement with us here on this planet, but there's got to be, I'm sure that within the whole universe, there's got to be a whole lot more than that, right?
Oh, yes, definitely there are many more extraterrestrial civilizations out there. But as far as the Earth is concerned, and here we're talking about surface humanity, because the subterranean branch of humanity are very different. They are not genetically mixed as we are on the surface of the planet. We on the surface, 22 different extraterrestrial groups have historically intervened and kind of done things with our genetics. And broadly speaking, you can talk about the different racial groups on the surface of the planet and identify different ET groups with that. So, for example, you would say, with the kind of the Semite race coming out of the Middle East, you would say that would be the kind of Anunnaki. For the, say, Native Americans, Indians, you could point to a race like the Syrians, and for the Scandinavian races, you could point to the Pleiadians. So these different extraterrestrial groups genetically are connected to each of these racial groups around the planet, and by and large have been kind of like protecting them or sponsoring them in whatever way. So you'll have in the Norse gods will be kind of like these kind of Nordic-looking gods, white, long white hair or red hair, very robust, powerful beings. For the Indians, it's you have the gods that appear to be blue, like Krishna and so forth, and which signifies a different extraterrestrial race involved with that particular kind of racial subgroup. So 22 different extraterrestrial races by and large corresponds to 22 racial subgroups on planet Earth that have been historically helped or genetically engineered by different extraterrestrial groups for many, many thousands of years.
And in 2011, I spoke with a guy by the name of Charles, and he told me about these tall whites who he had interacted with on a military base. And he was so sincere. To this day, I think there's probably not at least a couple-day period that goes by that I don't think about it.
That's Charles Hall, yes.
Yeah, it's Charles Hall.
I remember interviewing him quite a few years ago, and yes, you're absolutely correct. He's a very sincere individual, and he actually was speaking about the U.S. secret space program back in early 1960s. He witnessed it, and basically witnessed how these tall white extraterrestrials were helping the U.S. Air Force reverse engineer nuclear-powered flying saucers for travel to the moon. So back in the 60s, the U.S. Air Force already had craft that was capable of traveling to the moon that had been reverse engineered from the information and the assistance that the tall whites had provided to the Air Force through Nellis Air Force Base, which, for those that don't know, Nellis Air Force Base adjoins Area 51.
Oh, Area 51. Now that's of course not such a secret anymore, and a lot of speculation that they may have moved whatever they were doing from there. But I don't know if they would, though, because they still will come up on you with the guns if you get too close.
Yes, well, the Area 51, there are two facilities there that are important to keep in mind. One is the Groom Lake facility, which is where the CIA and the Air Force developed their spy planes. And then there's the Papoose Lake facility, which is called S4. And that's where they have developed, or they studied, and basically reverse engineered the flying saucers that had been recovered not only from extraterrestrial craft but also from Nazi Germany and from the Vril Society, that these were craft that were at S4. But S4 is used basically as a study and development facility. It is not where the secret space program is deployed out of. For that you have to go to Utah, the state of Utah, and there are areas there, Dugway Proving Grounds. That is where they actually have the Solar Warden program kind of like being actually deployed from. That's where they have all of their top secret facilities for deploying the craft. So Area 51 and S4 is used for the study and the development of advanced flying saucers. But Dugway Proving Grounds in Utah is where they actually deploy the developed spacecraft.
And they're obviously doing quite a bit underneath our feet these days, too, aren't they?
Oh, there's a lot of building of underground bases that's been going on for quite some time. I'm sure you've discussed Phil Schneider and his testimony about the deep underground military bases that he worked on. There's well over 100 that he was familiar with back in the mid 1990s, and they've been building them ever since. So yes, they have been building these underground cities because some of them have like 10,000 people. It's kind of more than just a base. It's really like a self-contained city that is based underground, which is then joined by these very advanced kind of monorail train systems, shuttle systems that can travel from base to base very, very quickly, even traveling underneath the oceans. They can go from one base to another in very short periods of time. So yes, a lot happening underground.
Incredible. Well, we're getting right here at the end. So what I'd like to do is give you the floor to get out anything that you'd like. And no rush. But we have come to the end of my questions. The listeners have sent a lot of questions. They haven't called in, but they've sent them. So I do appreciate it. Doctor, I want to give you the floor. Anything you want to get out, appearances, websites, anything. Go right ahead.
Thank you. Yes. Well, the thing I'd really like the listeners to know about is this new book, Insiders Reveal Secret Space Programs and Extraterrestrial Alliances. It discusses in depth all of the things that I've been discussing tonight, and it has all the references and all of the links that you'll need to be able to kind of follow up and confirm this for yourself. And I think if you haven't already done so, then just visit the exopolitics.org website. That's my main website, and there you can find all of the information that I've been discussing as well, in terms of short articles and so forth, and links to the videos and the interviews that have been done with Corey Good, and the other secret space program personnel that I've interviewed. So yeah, just go to the website exopolitics.org, and I want to thank you, Michael, for having me on your show and giving me the opportunity to just share some of the research I've been doing, and I just want to kind of finish on a positive note. I think that the truth is finally out there, and the truth is out there now, and the more of us that can kind of like embrace that truth. I mean, you don't have to agree with everything I say in my books or in my articles, but if you think that that it's 90% true or whatever, then pass it on to your friends. Let others know that this is giving us a big part of the puzzle that has been hiding what's been going on for a long, long time, and I think that more people that share this information, the more we can kind of like collectively get together and take action. And I truly do believe that one thing more powerful than armies is an idea whose time has come, and the idea of full disclosure has come. So let's get out there and let's make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, Doctor, I thank you so much for you taking the time out to be with us tonight, and I thank you for your research, and I'm just glad, and I say this a lot because I mean it so much, that I'm glad that there's people like yourself who go out there and do the really hard work, and it gives guys like me an opportunity to learn from you and to share with many. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Have a great night, my friend. All right, folks, there he goes, Dr. Michael Schratt.
Had now become transnational entities. And so the U.S. military, especially the Navy, has been behind these disclosures, has been basically allowing its military members to come forward and to release their information. So in the case of all three of these whistleblowers, including Corey Goode, there was significant military support for them coming forward. And in the case of Corey Goode, he's actually now working with elements of the secret space program, which is run by the U.S. military, which is called Solar Warden. The political leadership or the military leadership of Solar Warden are actually encouraging Corey Goode to come forward with his testimonies, and similarly for Randy Kramer.
So they are currently working with a secret space program.
Well, that's correct, yes. Both of them are working with military officials or leaders in the secret space programs who want this information to come out. So in the case of Randy Kramer, he says that he is being advised by two members of the U.S. military, the U.S. Marine Corps, to basically come forward and reveal what he has experienced. And Randy Kramer has been doing similarly since he came forward earlier this year.
I see. Okay, so did they talk about how they get to Mars? What's going? Because I know of another gentleman, and I'm sure you probably know of him, Andrew Bishago, and he talks about teleportation. And I'm wondering if it has anything to do with that.
Well, yes. Basically, all the whistleblowers that I mentioned all say that teleportation or jump room technologies do exist. In the case of Michael Ralph, he says that that's how he was taken to Mars, through jump room technology. In the case of Randy Kramer and Corey Goode, both of them say that they were taken to Mars by secret spacecraft, very large craft that have been built secretly through various multinational aerospace corporations like Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, and the Boeing Corporation, that these corporations have been able to develop these highly advanced anti-gravity technologies and spacecraft that can travel the distance between Mars and the Earth in less than an hour.
Wow. That's fast. That's real fast. So, well, where did this technology originate from? Is it reversed engineering technology? Is it technology left over from ancient civilization, or are we just that good that we could create this?
A mind control that was used to wipe their memories, and so they basically referred to a process whereby at the end of their 20-year tour of duties, they were sent back to Earth with their minds being wiped of all the memories. And so in two of those cases, that is Randy Kramer and Michael Ralph, each of them basically were able to regain their memories over time through flashbacks, through some kind of retrieval process that was kind of like just the body basically restoring the memories, kind of like post-traumatic stress syndrome, where people who have suffered traumatic events, they have flashbacks and then they go seeking counseling and find out, well, why am I having these terrible kind of nightmares? And as they get to counseling, well, they find out that certain events happen to them that accounts for that PTSD. So that's what happened with those two whistleblowers. In the case of Corey Good, he says that basically the mind control never worked on him. He always remembered, and that was something that he retains to the present day. That he remembers everything that happened to him. That he never lost his memories, and there are reasons for why this mind control, mind wiping technology works on some people better than others. But essentially, if three people can remember these events, that means there must be thousands of others who don't remember.
Yeah, I would assume so. Now that these three do remember, and they are publicly talking about it, has there been any, I guess any kind of threats or attempts to stop them?
Well, that's interesting. I believe that the reason that they have not been stopped dead in their tracks, and this is something that each of them discussed to varying degrees, is that they've been allowed or indirectly encouraged to come forward. And that basically comes from a kind of policy dispute between those people running these secret space programs. There are those that want this information to be leaked or to be released to the general public, and those that want to maintain secrecy. And what has happened, and this also explains the Disclosure Project press conference as well, and why Dr. Stephen Greer was able to get as many as 400 whistleblowers to come forward to reveal their experiences in these various secret space programs and the UFO cover-up, was that sometime in the mid-1990s, the U.S. military basically decided that it would no longer abide by the secrecy system that appeared to be run by quasi-governmental corporate organizations that Michael Sala speaking.
Well, Dr. Sala, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands. We are live, and I thank you for being here with us tonight.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I thought maybe we could start things out with some background. I'd love to hear about your background and what led you into the great work that you've been doing.
I'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay, well, I became very interested in this phenomenon back in 2001. In May, I saw the Disclosure Conference that was put on by Dr. Stephen Greer at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., and when I heard those 21 witnesses, it was truly life-changing. I was an academic at the time. I was teaching international politics at American University. I was a professor there on the faculty, and I realized that the information that Dr. Greer was able to provide through these whistleblowers really changed everything I knew or thought I knew about international politics and international conflict. And the more I studied the testimonies of those witnesses, the more it held up to scrutiny, and so I became convinced, after doing that for about 18 months of studying these various testimonies, that this was all very real. And so in early 2003, I decided that I would make this field of exopolitics my new academic interest.
I see, and boy, is it something, isn't it? I mean, it's just it's like the never-ending frontier. So, well, I wanted to ask you quickly before we go on with the subject at hand, because I've had this question's kind of been thrown at me left and right from people lately. What do you say to those who claim that we could never get through the Van Allen radiation belt? We couldn't leave the planet. People couldn't come here because we wouldn't have the technology to protect ourselves. And I don't know if you want to answer that, you can, and you don't have to. But I'm just curious because I think we've got the technology to do it.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Van Allen belts basically is an area of radioactive particles around the Earth, which, if any one was to stay in that area for any length of time, yes, you could certainly suffer quite serious radiation poisoning. But the thing is, spacecraft actually fly through that. Anything that is traveling to the moon, any of those Apollo missions and the astronauts on them, I mean, they would have flown through the Van Allen belts. They wouldn't have been in them long enough for the radiation to cause any kind of serious health effects. And the space programs basically are prepared for that. I mean, they have satellites in orbits ranging from a few hundred miles to thousands of miles, and you know, they pass through the Van Allen belts, and they're able to provide the necessary protective layers. Aluminium is sufficient to protect these satellites from the radiation, and so the same thing did happen with the Apollo missions.
And that's a great answer, and and that's what I thought. I mean, to say that we couldn't solve a problem like that, and that everything's been a lie. I mean, that's really giving no credit whatsoever to our species. I mean, I think we're smart enough to figure these things out. I mean, somebody did a long time ago. I think there's enough evidence of that. So, who's to say we couldn't? So, anyways, I just wanted to start with that. I thought that'd be a good place to start. Now, tell me about your research into the secret space program, and what do you know about it, and tell us a little bit about some of the whistleblowers. One in particular, Jeremy Corbyn, I think his name is. Somebody had asked me to ask you about him.
Sure. Well, the secret space program is something that basically I became interested in back in 2003 when I really began researching the exopolitics field, and my first interest was in the missing funds from the Pentagon, the auditing irregularities that became famous on September 10 of 2001 when Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld got up and gave a press conference and said that we've got $1.7 trillion missing, or that we can't account for in the Pentagon, and people kind of like said what, and then the next day you had the 9/11 attacks, and of course that dominated the news cycle from then on. But it became very clear to me that missing money at the Pentagon was basically the clue into a vast project that was being funded through this money that was being funneled through the Pentagon, that the Pentagon couldn't account for through regular auditing methods, and so that became my first clue that there was a huge secret space program that was being funded behind the scenes. And over the years since then, I've run into people, whistleblowers, who have been able to give me a lot of insights or some understanding of the secret space programs. Typically, people who have worked as super soldiers, who claim they've been taken off planet. A good example is Randy Kramer, who says that he worked as a super soldier for 17 years on Mars itself, that he came forward in early 2014 to say that. And more recently with Corey Good, who also says that he worked for 20 years in the secret space programs.
I see. And of these whistleblowers, I guess, what is some of the best evidence? And you know, I don't expect them to like pull a spaceship out of their garage or anything, but I mean, what is some of the best evidence that they have presented about the secret space program and those things that are contributed with it?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Now, everyone asks, well, you know, what's the evidence? And the thing is, these people are eyewitnesses, and I guess it's always worth mentioning that eyewitness testimony is direct evidence that in a court of law or in any congressional hearing can get a person convicted or someone indicted. So first person or eyewitness testimony is evidence. And so far, in the book that just has come out, I refer to eyewitness testimonies of 3 people that all said that they spent time on Mars. That is Michael Ralph, Randy Kramer, and Corey Good. So these 3 people all said that they worked for secret space programs, and that during their service they spent periods on Mars ranging from just short-term visits to as much as 20 years. And so that is 3 people who have direct evidence or have given eyewitness testimony that we have a secret space program with bases on Mars. And 3 witnesses is pretty compelling in any court of law. I mean, if someone sees a murder and you know the body is missing, it can't be found, but a person is missing, but 3 witnesses come forward. Eyewitnesses say that, well, you know, we saw so and so kind of shoot this person and then take the body away and dump it or whatever. You know, that's enough to get a conviction. And so similarly here, you have 3 witnesses who say that they have been on Mars with these secret space programs that are all being illicitly funded by this money that regularly goes missing through the Pentagon.
That's incredible. Now, did in your speaking with any of them, did they mention anything about? I mean, were they supposed to not remember this? I mean, how? Because I guess I wonder how they were let go remembering such things. So I would think that they weren't supposed to remember this, or they weren't supposed to talk about it at the very least.
Exactly, yes. Each one of them describes